Hello. Hello, my name is Steve Jaguar.
And I'm Mike Foster.
Welcome to our visual newsletter for your impatient world, where we talk about all things Kubernetes, vulnerabilities, cybersecurity, and amazing tools for your automation pleasure.
Yes, and today we're talking a little bit about why ransomware isn't the problem, a little discussion about infrastructure as code, security as code to do with that, a couple breaches, one big cloud native security, say purchase acquisition, and we're going to talk some K3s on Pi. So thanks for joining and welcome to the show. Yeah, a show about K8s and stuff, mixing some K3s. If you like what you're seeing, if you're on Twitch, subscribe, follow, send us some messages, let us know what you want to hear. If you're on YouTube later, would love it if you could share some videos. We're going to put some clips and you'll get the full list and link list of what we're talking about on YouTube. So check it out over there. And thanks again for joining. Steve, how's your week?
All right. I thought we were going forward cap today. You duped me.
I didn't want to go for the twins look. You know, we got a few black hat things.
Apart.
Yeah.
I see. We did get black though. That's cool. Yeah, my week's been good. Been really good. Been playing with my pies a little bit, doing actual work as well. But generally, it's been pretty relaxed. DevSecCon's coming up next week over here, the 24-hour conference. So I'm kind of getting gearing up for that. You?
Yeah. Yes. Same old. Anything you're looking forward to? DevSecCon? I'm kind of curious what I need to check out.
I do not know. I think that we should have planned. We could have done a DevSecCon
next week
thing. I just, because I have to actually do things like work-wise at it. I've just been being very insular and paying only attention to me. So I'm gonna have to take a step back and on Monday and plan.
All right. Well, let me know. I'm kind of curious what sessions I need to check out. So,
all right. Well, follow us on Twitter. Those are our Twitters. When we do figure it out, we'll tweet good things.
For sure.
All right, dive straight in.
Let's do it.
You introduced this already.
Yes.
This obviously got my attention because for two reasons. One, it said ransomware is not the problem, and we were just talking about ransomware. And it was written by Adam Shostak, who is a prominent threat modeling guru. But it's worth the read. So I think Michael's already said, this is, let me just give you the TLDR. It's lengthy, but it was worth talking about successful cybersecurity patterns. He recommends some books. He talks about just starting with least privilege, because typically a decent least privilege pattern is kind of good for ransomware. Like, you can get ransomware and it just doesn't do anything if you're doing things right. And then he complains about desktop operating systems just basically giving you admin by default, kind of being one of the biggest problems, but also just talking about how software is hard. Turns out.
Yeah, and he also differentiates between like Mac OS and Windows, and Mac now with some of the new security features. They'll say an application only can write to specific directories, right? If I open Visual Studio Code and I try to run anything in Visual Studio Code, it'll say, hey, like, do we trust this? Do we not? What's going on? And so let's say you're talking about writing a software on top of that, you're going to get a lot of false flags being thrown around because some user goes in and changes their settings or tweaks their settings slightly. And then, okay, well, do you block the user from changing the settings? Well, now they can't do anything on their system, right? So it is hard. It's vastly complicated and largely relies on the user to understand what's going on, right?
Ooh,
I know.
Can we
trust that?
On the user? No, not at all.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's a great write up. It's definitely worth checking out. Slightly just a weird transition, but I've had this conversation with Kubernetes and mounting hosts in security software.
Okay.
Just bear with me because I just talked about file systems, but it's really hard when you get developers that go in and mount, file systems or host file systems or some sort of NFS system in. If you have some security tool that's watching that, you're going to get a lot of false alerts depending on what you set up, especially if you're only looking at the container level. And been a constant discussion about how to address that. Do you just make them aware, like, hey, there are mounts in these containers, or do you say any mount you get a alert on, or just kind of curious what anybody's thoughts were, your thoughts, Steve, or anybody in the comments, because it's something that really hasn't been fully solved, let's say, for how to properly alert and notify for containers at runtime with mounts. Because I find people use it in weird ways, right? It's like anti-patterns almost.
There isn't really is there a best practice document out there that says, I mean, there's certainly almost not quite a red team guide, but there's a lot of, like, if you're in a container, the first thing you do is go look at the mounts.
Yeah. Or try to mount something else in, right?
Or try to mount something else in. That's your total attack vector or your reconnaissance that you do right away. But you're right. So security systems should be cognizant of what is mounted and alert you. But the inconsistency with which people use it makes it really hard. Yeah, that's a good point.
And there's also a difference in development versus in production, right? Like if you're in production, really everything should be pretty static and immutable. And if something gets mounted in, it should be at pod startup or initialization. It's not.
Yeah, new mounts. That should be flagged.
Yeah, this pod's been available for 6 hours and now it has something mounted to it. Let's check this out, right?
Yeah,
so it's
and mounts that run things too. I think we've talked about this before, where I had a situation with a let's say a client who shall remain nameless, who was mounting their liveness pro. They wrote a liveness script, and then rather than put it into their containers, they were just mounting it repeatedly into everything, and then it would run. So that something from a mount was running, and then they got angry and said, "Hey, your security tool is throwing all these false flags." I'm like, "No, I think it's kind of doing the right thing."
Yeah,
don't do that.
No, and that's what config maps are for, right? Or injection. It's or initialization init pods, init containers. There's so many other ways to go about it. But yeah, it was
so many other ways to go about it. That was totally it. All right, that was a good article and a good deviation. The next one is going to be the infrastructure as software versus infrastructure as code argument. Many things to discuss here.
This is infrastructure as config
versus infrastructure as config. Roughly, you put this in, written by celebrity advocate Chris Nova.
Yeah, it was interesting. Just make some good points here, because I normally, when people are talking about infrastructure as code, they're talking about declarative versus imperative sort of way of looking at things. So your Terraform versus your Ansible, right? I declare it one way, and if anything changes, I need to go and change the system, versus something that I've made changes to the system and I can expand on that to a certain amount. One of the downsides of imperative is you can get drift because you can make subtle changes. And if you're not properly, let's say, keeping track of those changes, you might not understand what your environment is doing. One of the nice things about declarative is you're going to get a very static environment. The issue is you have to maintain state files all the time, and you are hooked into those state files. And you can always correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, since you're on the ball on this stuff. But
I know it's my job now.
yeah. So
that's cool. Yeah. What's interesting? So we talked about this beforehand, and my instant reaction, just to be like, to try and make as many enemies as I can, was who cares? Like config code software, like Turing complete, non-current Turing complete, meaning does it do logic? If this, do that, which is a pain in the butt for Terraform, and easy for other things. And is this where it mentions Pulumi, or was it the response that mentions Pulumi? Here's the response, which is pretty good. Predicting that, not that inflammatory speak, but Pulumi will destroy Terraform.
Yeah, that was an aggressive first comment there.
Yes.
It was. I kind of understand where she's going with this, and you're right. Infrastructure as config. Basically, she's just talking about the layers to get to a fully infrastructure as software. So it's not really infrastructure as code; it's software because it's whole ecosystem, right? So you can write, just because you write in HCL doesn't make it infrastructure as code. You need the underlying programming to go and turn it into something, right? I think you're getting caught in the weeds with the argument a little bit. I understand sort of the differentiation. I think the write-up is also pretty worthwhile. And for if you want to show it after we kind of get into the discussion, Chris Nova has a pretty cool website, which writes a bunch of stuff that's worth checking out.
What makes me laugh here, I'm going to show you just real quick, is that the formal write-up is here, which I'll show you because you have to see this. And then an admitted, and an easier version to read is here. So you'll understand why it says easier to read in like 2 seconds when you see this. Which looks, when I got there, I was like, this is super cool. It looks like a bad movie that was trying to show cybersecurity crap. And then you try to read it and you're like, oh my God, I'm getting a headache. I can't read this. And this just links to the GitHub that this is pulled from, and it's just super easy to read. So we'll put these links in both the YouTube comments, and we can probably paste one into the chat now if you want to go give it a read after the show. But it's interesting, and thank you for putting this one in, because like actually the banter below the discussion is pretty fascinating. I did have one comment on Pulumi though, jumping back over it. You can't read this anyway, so let's do this. And that was because I am working in security by infrastructure as code, so declarative is good, scanning stuff, blah blah blah, right? But when you start abstracting your declarative models into proper language like Pulumi or SDKs, which are supporting things like TypeScript, now you're going all the way back to writing code. What happens if you, like the easy thing about Terraform or YAML is you can just scan it and you can find misconfigurations because it's declarative. You leverage declarative and you know it's going to happen. So find it now before you deploy it wrong. As soon as you become Pulumi, or was the other one I was picking on? I can't remember. There's another one, Cluster API. Is that it? Where how do you translate that back? Because something the work I'm doing at the moment is all about finding misconfigured live resources in runtime, say on AWS, and taking it all the way back to a commit. Right? That's some of the
it's the workflow.
It's like super freaking hard if you are writing your AWS configuration in TypeScript. Like, where's the change? Anyway, there's no security for that. I think Pulumi's cool, awesome for ops if you're a coder already, if you're proper DevOps, but super hard. You're throwing a whole new security problem at us.
Yeah, and that really is the benefit of a declarative infrastructure as code solution, right? It is the workflow. It's one of the reasons why Kubernetes and Kubernetes objects is so useful, is because I can go and say, that's where it is, right? And I just go and declare it, and which also means I know exactly where the change is. When you're getting into conditionals and loops and you're looking for something that is more imperative, you somewhat need to trust that the person who's writing the imperative code and applying the changes is also circling back and changing the original commit, so that when you go and try to set the environment again, it's where it needs to be. The only benefit, well, I can say this as somebody who's dipping their toes in Ansible for the home server, the benefit is you can make a lot of quicker changes up front. right? So like you want to get a working environment going, imperative is really easy because I can just go and continuously make changes until I get my working environment, and then I have to go back and do it. You just need to make sure you close that loop in terms of the human process, right? But
Yes.
obviously, I think the general thought is that it's humans that are going to brings up new tooling like Terrascan, Chekhov. Yeah, exactly. So
Awesome.
it's just, and it all I think just comes back to workflow of understanding the way that you've structured your infrastructure and then finding the tool that will help you sort of navigate that workflow the most efficiently. It's those things matter. You're working in containers, VM security is not necessarily gonna, or the way you look at it, it's gonna change, right? Cool.
Awesome. All right, next one. Next one's funny.
Yeah.
This is Matt Fuller, my former colleague, who is CloudSploit, basically the guy who wrote CloudSploit. Security vendor website bingo. It is awesome. Can I make it even bigger?
I hope so. Zero trust in giant font.
Zero trust in giant font. We should check the big spender section later to see how many of these. Actually, see if we can get a bingo. Can't sign up without scheduling a demo. This is like my favorite thing we've ever looked at. We bring AI and ML to the insert whatever the hell you're doing process. Uses the word cyber out of context. Multi-cloud. How you can shift left. This is amazing.
Stock photo of overdressed people looking at a piece of paper. That's good.
Mentions SolarWinds somewhere on the homepage. We are definitely going to do this for the company we're going to look at shortly. Sign in button is impossible to find. Dashboard with lots of graphics. This is amazing.
I love the call to action pop-up when attempting to close the page. I've gone on websites where, you read for a little bit and they insert the pop-up, 30 seconds, a minute into you reading, and legitimately every time that happens, I just close the page on people. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this.
Oh, gone. Yeah.
See ya.
This is amazing.
Yeah, well done.
I'm gonna yes, Matt is awesome. So I'm gonna also post this in there. All right, that is all that I want to spend all day now just with that in my hand and going from website to website, and probably including the ones for the companies that employ us.
Yeah,
so probably terribly guilty of these things.
Yeah, happens.
All right, moving on swiftly. This is one of yours.
Facebook, yeah, it's just one I thought was kind of cool and just more telling as to how people find solutions, right? So Facebook develops a new method to reverse engineer deepfakes and track their source. You're going to create AIs to create deepfakes. We're going to create an AI to reverse that. And now we have something that can go and detect deepfakes and somewhat try to remove them, right? There's it's one of the reasons why I do have faith when I hear things about like AI, or you see stuff that are a little bit more, let's say, hyperbolic about the future of technology, right? And how data and things like that are going to be used. There's always a yin and yang to this stuff. For every hacker, there's somebody that's securing a massive amount of infrastructure and trying to outsmart them. So thought it was interesting. Figured that this was going to be sort of the next step, is some sort of counteract capabilities for deepfakes. So
it's good.
Before we get into the crazy stuff, this is a calm your nerves. Everything's going to be okay, people.
This is a good thing. Look, they state the bleeding obvious right there. The work could help future deepfake investigations. Yeah, no kidding. I assume that's why you're doing it. But it's, I like it. I like these deepfake examples. Like, these aren't real people.
Nope.
That's cool. I mean, that's scary, but it's cool.
Yeah, it is. There's all the fake avatars now too that are coming out, right? There's like whole online personalities on Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that that are completely fake personalities. It's a crazy world.
It is indeed.
Hey, I gotta find some of that stuff for the WTF section next week.
Oh yeah, I still don't apologize. I still don't have that intro sting for It's the CVE section. This is getting consistent enough that I really do have to get on and do that. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, moving swiftly forward. This is from the Tigera website, Kubernetes Container Escape using eBPF. And I was saying, finally, eBPF is being used for evil. But
It's
you
about time.
summarized this very well. Yeah. And nice grab your attention why you should be worried. But you summarized this very well, actually, in our previous discussion. So why don't you, going through privileged capabilities, the cap BPF, some people don't even know exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a bunch of cap-ish capabilities, right? Catnap raw, and really cap sysadmin is that overarching capability that if you have it in a container, you can pretty much do anything you want. So cap BPF was created for the capabilities that BPF needs to navigate and set up things within your kernel space. And this is an issue only as long as it's an issue for all capabilities. If you give if you have a privileged container, but you run as non-root user, well, then they still have those capabilities in the container. They just need to be able to exploit it. So there's it's sort of this has always been an issue, and it's more of an issue with how you set up your containers and not necessarily cap BPF, right? If really it should be a run as non-root user, unprivileged container with a cap drop all, right? Drop all capabilities for Kubernetes, and then you're making the exceptions as they come. That would be your ideal zero trust container configuration. Does that really happen in real life? No. And I mean, yeah, exactly. You gotta
Zero trust.
Yeah, zero trust check. Yeah, I didn't put it in big letters though, so no bingo point there. Yeah, so it's, in Kubernetes, privileged containers inherit cap sysadmin privileges by default, and as a result, unprivileged users inside a privileged container can escalate those and break out of the container. And
Cool.
again, you can do it with cap sysadmin, so you can do it with cap BPF. This is I don't think this is necessarily a shocking thing. And then you can disable it in the kernel with a kernel unprivileged BPF disabled. Don't the blatant obvious one. Don't grant cap sysadmin privileges to containers for mitigation, right? Run as non-root user. So, and that's the thing is you can do it. So you can run a privileged container and then run as non-root user. You just do have a little bit of a surface there where if they are able to escalate, they then have those privileges, right? So, I guess when you're trying to take a look at these and you have a security solution like, StackRox and ACS or, like a bunch of other container runtime security tools, they're going to tell you, hey, this is a privileged container or this is a non-privileged container, but you have cap sysadmin capabilities. Watch out, because this might not be an issue now, but it's, your database that, if has like a massive surface area of attack or something like that, right? Attack surface. It's just more of a being aware of your configuration.
Totally.
The other thing,
I think
I will say is you can look at this at the container level. It doesn't necessarily mean you know how to fix it, right? Because there are a couple different fixes that are going to apply differently depending on how you're setting this up. Like, do you really want to turn off kernel unprivileged BPF and disable it? Maybe, but you might run into a bunch of other issues because now you don't have that privilege at all on the host, right? There's
you need that.
Yeah, and I guess it's just getting into the weeds of like when you pick a security tool, knowing how to fix the issue, because there are probably 5 or 6 different ways, probably more. That's the tough part, right? Those are like the workflow breaking changes when you decide to make those choices.
What's funny is this article is kind of like a self-serving act of kindness from Tigera, because they use eBPF and they are a security tool. So the very last thing is like, and by the way, if you use our product, this is not a problem. We've already done all the right things. And I was like, oh, good, actually, good reason you said that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. It would be cool because it would be, well, they actually link also to the exploit code, like an example of code in this article you can use to try if you want to have a play with it. So maybe that's something that a viewer can do and then come on the show as a guest and show us how to do it. Hey, how about that, right? That'd be fun.
Yeah.
All righty. New section.
Yeah, we're getting into some of the more funny stuff. It's good.
All right. I added this one to our curated list because hack exposed some US business information, customer data. So it's South Korea and Taiwan McDonald's. It's everywhere, right? And you can read the whole story. It doesn't really matter. The point was, the reason I added it here is like, I have a backstory on this. A couple of years back, when I was at Synopsys, I was at an event. A guy comes and sits in the booth with me because he's just hiding, essentially, because he's tired. Turns out he's like the McDonald's guy that is working on infrastructure. And I was like, oh, wow, you must have like a lot of pain being McDonald's. And he's like, no, we're not connected to anything. Like, they didn't have, that's pre any McDonald's delivery. It's before any Uber Eats. So you couldn't order food from McDonald's. And if you remember, like even like 3 years ago, you can't order anything from McDonald's. There was no connectivity. Their menus, when you go to a store, and you can do the program thing and get your food, they're not online. When they update those panels, they have to send the software to every McDonald's because they were so scared of being online and having any connectivity, because the guy said, like, we are like the number one most loved brand, but we're also the number one most hated brand. And it's like, the second we go do any of this, we got to be so secure. It's ridiculous. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize that they were so like Battlestar Galactica primitive, kind of like wired phones. And it was nuts. So I just kind of, when I saw they had a delivery service, I thought, oh, they're creeping into being connected. I wonder when we'll see a breach. Ta-da! So it was going to happen. I didn't even know that they had like crossed over and were now sort of connected online enough that they stole customer emails, phone numbers, addresses, South Korean, and obviously, connected enough. There's all sorts of data in there. So that was the backstory. McDonald's being hit by a data breach is it in itself probably expected.
I did know that I think they bought 2 years ago or 3 years ago, they bought a company who does AI and specifically like around license plate and upselling, because they've realized that, let's say you have a family of 4 and you come in, you're probably going to get the family of 4 meal. Now, they're not really going to upsell you on an extra meal, but what they could is like, hey, it's a hot day. We know that you normally buy the family of 4 meal because you have 2 kids. Okay, let's upsell you an ice cream, right? I think that's an interesting path that they're going.
Oh.
But yeah, you're going to need connectivity for that type of stuff. But then again, that's a lot of data, right?
That guy mentioned that direction, like about profiling people and suggesting menu items. And he's like, we can't do any of it because we don't have access to any way to implement it. So it's just like, yeah, that was pretty good. Pretty good.
Same reason why they have terminals too. You don't have pressure talking to a human. So like I'm more willing to go through a panel to select things, and then I can get upsell and get coupons and get those things. It's smart.
Yeah. Automation upselling you is so much easier than a human. Hey, you added this one.
Yeah, it's just breaches all over the place. Audi, Volkswagen. Yeah, so they got affected. Breach involves 3.3 million customers. Over 97% of those affected are Audi customers. It varies per customer. I'm not exactly sure. They didn't really talk about everything that was released, but in some data, it's first, last name, personal or identifying content. So mailing address, email, phone number. In some cases, it's make and model of cars. So it looks like they hacked sort of their whole sort of database of all their customers and what they've bought. So it's yikes.
So what I'm curious about, right? And let me know if you saw this in the article and I didn't see it. And we had a conversation about this to do with GDPR, right? Audi is a German company, regardless. It's in America. They're talking about. Does it say that they were hacked, or is it using breach to describe? They are using because they have to say that the data was available. They don't know whether anybody got it.
Good point.
So that's an
Yeah, it
example of
disclosed
where
that the vendor
everyone
left
freaks out.
unsecured data exposed on the internet between the 2 years.
Right. So it's possible your data's out there, but they don't know. They didn't find it on the dark net. It's not like there, and they don't have evidence of an attack. They just know that they screwed up and left the door open, like, and went on holiday, you know, like
For 2 years?
well, it probably is okay because if they were actually breached, some of their security would have kicked off.
Yeah, you would have thought
So
you'd see some high IO and network throughput, right? If somebody was downloading a massive database of 3.3 million customers.
the moment you find this, you run a diagnostic. Suddenly all your logs become really important.
Yeah,
And you
exactly.
start looking through. And then you start realizing you don't do logging very well. And then you check in and you see if you can find any indication of a breach. But 2 years is a long time. And the thing I just said is like a great personal example of I once went away. This is really stupid. I went away on holiday, and my neighbor came to my house and because she was going to take care of our dogs. And my dogs were out. They were just laying in the yard, and the door was open. I'd left. So she kindly phoned me and said, yeah, I picked up your dogs and took them for a walk. And by the way, I locked your door because you might want to do that while you're away. It's like, that's the kind of same thing. Anyway, stupid story. When you leave your house, lock your doors and don't let your dogs wander through the neighborhood. Yeah, we've all been there. All right. This is a Irish.
This one made me
another one of yours.
I don't know if this is a clickbaity title because I don't really know a lot about Irish law, so I don't want to claim anything. But Irish police will have the power to compel people to provide passwords for electronic devices when carrying out a search warrant under new legislation. It will enable data to be collected so the effectiveness and use of powers can be assessed. Special measures will be introduced for suspects who are children. It will bring in longer detention periods for the investigation of multiple offenses being investigated for a maximum of up to 48 hours.
Interesting. What do you think? The area is very complex.
Oh, I think it's terrible. I understand why they're doing it. And specifically because a lot of crime now has moved on the internet and a lot of data is on the internet. And it's pretty easy to, you'll get higher conviction rates too if you had access to somebody's data. But I really, really worry about false flags and people getting prosecuted for things that really shouldn't be prosecuted for, right? Like, I don't know. There's
wide open for abuse. Is that what you're thinking?
It's just, it's kind of let's say you go and pull somebody's password and pull their data. You might be looking for something that isn't there, or you might be, it's just one of I don't really like giving an example, but like, let's say you're a 21-year-old or something like that. And you have pictures of like when you're in high school and something's in there and they go in and they're like, oh, what is this picture? It's like, oh, that's from when I was 16. You never deleted it. It's like, boom, there's a charge, right? Technically. Yeah. So
interesting.
It's one of those, the other thing too about passwords is you're also trusting that the police who are going to compel you to get your password are going to keep your password stored somewhere, access your devices, that you also don't use that password for other things. Right? I think it's really, really bad, and it's going to get stored somewhere, and eventually somebody's going to get hacked. And
it feels like one of those moments where people who make laws don't understand the technology. They don't understand what they're doing there. Because from a security perspective, your phone is the keys to the kingdom. It's where your MFA lives. It's got everything. So a cop coming up to you going, hey, or even somebody who looks like a police officer going, hey, let me see your phone. I'm allowed to, give me your face for a second. All right. Now because I'm, here's my badge to show, like, that's it. It's not a password to get a piece of data. It's like your whole identity. It's dangerous.
Yeah. The only good thing is it is a search warrant, at least. So there is a little bit of a thought to it. And
They're comparing
there's,
to going through your filing cabinet.
yeah. And so I'm assuming that, you know, there it's going to be used in the right capacity. You just make that assumption though. So I'm just glad that
Yeah.
Canada isn't the one testing this. You know, if you're in Ireland, let me know how it goes.
Yeah. Nice one. Yeah. Geez, if you want to know all my information, just create a Facebook account with a name of one of my friends and friend me. And then you'll never think about me. That's all you gotta do.
Mhm.
All
Yeah.
right. New
I,
section.
yeah, I can't do a good Irish accent, but that is a solid WTF. Now on to the big bucks.
Alrighty. Get your bingo cards ready.
Yeah,
Network security startup extra hop skips and jumps to a 900 million exit. What is this photo for?
that's a win for Seattle. Last year's
Oh,
Seattle-based network security startup Extra Hop was riding high, supporting or
wait.
approaching 100 million in ARR.
I didn't see the final price is a head scratcher. Why? Because they have no profit. That's another one of those acquisitions. But
Yeah, they're
yeah,
talking about IPO, no IPO, just a private equity firm buying stuff up.
look at that, right? That's interesting. Anyway, I'm not going to speculate on that, or should we? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think all the equity firms. I mean, you look at it. An equity firm just bought up VMware for, was it 9 billion? So you have these equity firms, and I'm just going to speculate on where they get the money. But the last year, everything's been flush with cash in the stock market, right? You're seeing massive amount
Mm,
of gains. You got to write off those gains somehow. So you make some big purchase, and it's just kind of the cascading effect. Now, hopefully, this brings in a lot more people into cybersecurity, though. In a way, it should.
Actually, it's not crazy. Look at they actually had 100 million in ARR,
Yeah,
and
I,
they got bought for 900 million. That's not crazy. That's reasonable.
yeah. It's not
Hmm.
out of nowhere. I think the crazy thing
No,
is why have I not really seen?
why have we never heard of them?
Yeah,
Let's go. All right, bingo card time. Is this person overdressed staring at a clipboard? No,
no
that's
font,
okay.
no piece of paper.
Attackers have nowhere to hide. Sunburst. Reference to solar winds. Ding, 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 ding.
All
Oh,
right,
oh,
so
that's on there. A dashboard with lots of
dashboard.
stuff. Ridiculous overstating of your attack surface is sort of here,
Where's is
probably
there
there.
big cyber? Is there cyber anywhere?
The word misuse of the word cyber. we could cyber attackers have the advantage. Okay, well let's call that sort of out of context. I like this. This isn't on the list, but I like this one. Um, uh, statistics with no citation. Yes, that should be on there. 80 stops breaches 84% faster. That's not on the list, but that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, as opposed
Wow.
to what me typing in the command line. Sure. Yeah.
I don't. Me just pulling the plug.
Yeah. I honestly,
Me. Well, they might.
I do kind of
Oh,
like the website though. I think it's sleek. Oh, we lost Steve there.
let's see.
You didn't have to
Yeah, keep
pull
going.
you'd have to pull the cord on your own webcam.
That's how I thought maybe somebody was attacking my camera, so I yanked the plug out of it. My camera's being weird. It's like because the heat. We're actually getting warmth here.
Mhm.
The camera gets hot, and then it goes pink, and it just turns off. So I have to just kind of reboot it occasionally. So, and we were planning the show beforehand, so now it's at like an hour and a half, so it's
Mhm.
freaking out.
By the way, the bingo card, the company uses analytics and machine learning to figure out if there are
Do they?
threats and where they're coming from.
Aha. All right. So there it is. Yeah, we're getting a lot of these. Can I sign up for a demo? I don't know.
Yeah, normally it's you
Probably.
can see the see how like right there on the I feel like there's
Oops. Like a defeat sunburst, beat that. Yeah, see that I can't see a demo unless I sign up. Where's the see how? Oh, here. Woo! Okay, all right. So it ticked all the buttons. Now we know how it got acquired. That's basically that bingo card is how to get acquired for a lot of money or funded heavily. Yep. All these things. Very cool.
Mm-hmm. 900
all right,
million.
That was 900 million. Well done, Extra Hop. That was obviously it works because they're a cybersecurity company that has decent ARR. So I guess it's a good product.
Yeah, we'll see him at KubeCon probably later this year.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Is this
Go
eBPF?
on. Are you diving into it? Is it an eBPF product? That's also
because
should be on the.
I don't think this is Kubernetes specific, right? It's software as a service. I think it's going to be visibility across cloud, data center, IoT. So yeah, I think it's got to be eBPF, and it's traffic. It's looking at traffic and network encryption. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Linux hosts at scale, eBPF, networking capabilities. I don't know. Checks out. Doesn't need to be Kubernetes specific, right?
No.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to follow this one. That's an interesting find.
Okay. All right. Where's our list? Are we done?
Well, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about pies, right? Not a full demo, but we're gonna talk about stuff. We got a little section for you.
Does everybody know what time it is?
Nice. So I don't have a camera behind me, but just there on the shelf above me here. So if my finger would be just below tickling the power cables on these guys. So this is my experimental Pi cluster. There's 4 in a little stack, and there's a anchor USB power thing just next to it, and a crappy little router that allows them all to talk. But it sits up there. What's awesome is there's a USB powered fan behind it that blows across it, and that was super essential. So this is how we got. I'm just going to give you a little evolution of them, right? I wanted to buy some Raspberry Pis. I went to Amazon because I am a Jeff Bezos worshiper, I guess. Bought 1 8 and a bunch of 4s, and then this thing, this like little stackaroonie, right? Because I thought there's a zillion of them out there. There goes my camera again.
Oh,
you don't need to see me for this section. It's getting hacked. It's just dying on me. All right, you don't need to see me for now. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll switch cameras.
You can go to the GoPro?
I could go to the GoPro.
Get the wide angle.
Because I have the option to go with the insane angle on the GoPro. Yeah. There you go.
Woo.
This is largely unflat. Well, not the other one was flattering, but so there's the screen I'm looking at. So yeah, I got these guys. This thing is a massive pain in the butt. So 4 Pis, it's exactly like that. I have 3 4 gigs and 1 8 gig. And I put them onto this thing. And this, I wonder if it goes to it and shows you that this guy. Look how nice this looks, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a pain in the ass. It comes with no instructions. You get more heat sinks than you need because it can be for any kind of Pi. So you get all the heat sinks for all the Pis, but you don't know which one you've got. So you're fiddling around with it. Yeah, it's kind of a pain. One thing, but it's cheap and easy, and you can just do it. One major problem that I found with it is that, so you see the little fans in the middle? Mm-hmm. So everything's got a fan. So everything's cooling off, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, because every layer has a fan, you have 2 fans on every single one. So you got one on the top and then actually one on the bottom, which is cooling the one below, but also pulling air from the PCB above. Okay. So the result is these top 3 Pis are great, but the bottom one, that layer does not have a fan. Mm-hmm. So it gets crazy hot. Yeah. So that was kind of like annoying.
So then you have the fan that's going across it now.
So
Oh yeah, look at that.
So before, see this drop?
Yeah.
That was this little drop was me adding that fan behind that I just showed you the photo.
Mhm.
So everything just went poosh. These were at 45 degrees, and this one was at like 70 or something. And it was red. Like these things, this is awesome, by the way. This is thank you to Michael Foster for doing the Prometheus and Grafana episode last week, which you should go watch. Because then I got this all set up on the Pis, and now it's monitoring my cluster, which is pretty freaking awesome with all sorts of stuff. So this is running on localhost 3000, and I port forwarded in another window. So this was great. Now, the struggle I had with this is when you're setting stuff up on Pis, one of the kind of big problems is storage, because it's like, it's all great to have k3s, Kubernetes, Nginx, yeah, sure. So, Nginx question. Started off with Willet cluster, Alex Ellis's kind of staple k3s on a Pi, right? Just follow the directions and it works. Something that's missing, which I'm going to aggregate this all into a GitHub eventually, because there's no one set of instructions that just works. One thing that's missing here is how to set static IPs on your Pi, because then they start changing and SSHing in is a pain in the butt, and how to get, so that's okay, but that little piece is missing. So you can follow that and it just works. Then I went looking for Kubernetes storage solutions that work on k3s, that work on Pi. And I settled on Rook Ceph. Why? Because it's the only one I could find that did completely explode.
Mhm.
I tried lots of things like Longhorn. I found out you can't use Raspbian. You can't use the default OS. You have to use the Ubuntu for Pi. Because otherwise this kind of works. It looks like it's working, but it's not working.
Mhm.
It just comes up and like weird crap happens and you don't know why. So don't bother with Raspbian or Debian. Use the Ubuntu release. I use 1804, or no, I think I went to 2004. And
It's,
it works. And
by the way, it's interesting that you mentioned Ceph, because I don't know if anybody's followed Ceph for like the last 4 years. When it first came out, it was kind of seen as it pitched a lot. It pitched this massive solution, and it kind of let the users down. But that being said, it's progressed so far in the last 4 years that now it's at the point where it pretty much runs really well as a scalable solution. I was
it's been
talking with
super solid.
yeah, it's a good it's a good storage solution, but it's just interesting because it almost never comes up in conversations about storage. You just hear like, oh, we'll use NFS, or we use, just
Well,
some sort of EBS or block store, right, in the cloud. But
yeah. I didn't want to go buy a bunch of stuff. Like I didn't want to buy a drive. All I wanted to do is I went and I bought some what claimed to be high performance SanDisk branded USBs. So each one of these guys has a USB 32 gig stuck in it. Maybe that was a bit small, but yeah. And I thought, how can I just use this distributed storage and it'd be easy? It pretty much worked out of the box. I did watch this. Well, to say something that made me laugh as well. I went looking for videos to try and find something that would show me how to do this, to see if anybody had done it. And I found this guy, Rook Ceph on Kubernetes Raspberry Pi cluster using cheap flash drives. I'm like, hey, that's exactly what I'm doing. And I went and looked at his video, and he's like live failing a lot on this. So it's a long slog to get through it all. But he does link to his manifests, which I clicked through, and here they are. And I actually got his node cleanup script, which you don't need half of this stuff, but you only actually really need these first three. But nevertheless, because Rook Ceph installs, but if it fails, you've got to manually go to the node and delete a whole bunch of crap that it wrote out. Otherwise, the state, you've got to just get rid of the varlib Rook. You have to, otherwise it remembers the crappy state that you installed.
Mhm.
So you could probably make this into like could you make it into an Ansible script that goes blah, 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 and does them all for you? Probably. I haven't done that. And then you got to use this to zap, because the SD card has to have no file system on it.
Mhm.
So they always come with one. You've got to blast it even from the beginning. But all of this is all gone. Like, you see, this is a particular moment in time, right? This isn't like the master. He says here, check out my master branch later to see how I modify these down the road. Okay, I will click your master branch and see that you got rid of it entirely. It's gone. And there was a comment I found from him saying, it sucked. I just got rid of it. Like, after making the video, he just hated it. And he said, the performance was crap. It was all, I didn't like it. It's like, but why? He had it all there. Like, it's not like it wasn't useful.
Yeah.
Why did he just delete it for someone else? Yeah, I mean, at least there was a link to the moment in time.
Yeah, it's GitHub.
But
luckily.
So then, just to like try and complete my story, both of our cameras are dead now. So you have to switch. So I'll just keep going. So then I want to know, okay, what is the performance? Because it's working now, right? And so my little contribution to the world is there is a little program called dbench you can use to run another program called FIO or FileIO or whatever. You can use it to just check file input output, but it's not written for Pi or ARM. So my little contribution is now, if you go to my Docker Hub, there's now an Alpine ARM FIO and a dbench RPi container that is now there. So I recompiled FIO for Alpine ARM, then use that container to make dbench RPi, which I then I have to push into a GitHub, the Docker file and the deployment that now deploys this as a job, and did my benchmark on my Rook Ceph. So that's the result of my benchmark, which when I went and looked at like a comparative bench, I don't know what's good. I got my stats and I was all happy. And then I was like, are these good? I don't know if they're good. But I went and looked at some stats and they're not terrible. And I have not noticed anything being slow or bad or incorrect. So I actually think this isn't a terrible solution. Unlike that guy who decided to completely bail and delete all evidence that he even tried. So that's the point I'm at with the pies at the moment. And then the only other thing I was going to do, as my other favorite to the world, which totally failed. Oh, that's my one. Was to make a Falco for ARM 64, which, as you can see, well, you probably can't see, but failed building. So this in progress. It completely crashed after 45 minutes of build. What I did learn though is that Falco is a pain in the butt to build and install for all of its kind of awesomeness.
I'm gonna have to check this one out. Thanks, Walid. Yeah, new tool called Cubestone. I'm doing another rebuild of my server, so definitely gonna check that out.
So what is Cubestone?
I don't know. Cool. Well, I'll have to check that out. Let's not give away too much this show. But I did have a question. Ultimate, thanks for joining. I see you're on YouTube too. Question about Ingress, hitting the client max body size limit of 1 megabit, but when updating my Ingress service.yaml, according to the documentation, it's not being reflected in my pod's actual Nginx config. Have you completely wiped the deployment and restarted it, or have you just made the, let's say, config map change? Because so you can change the config map, but unless you restart the pod, it's not going to get propagated because the Kubernetes is not going to inject files into a running workload. I don't know if that's the issue, but that's normally my first guess whenever things do get propagated. I normally just either do an update, like a rolling update, or just scale to 0 and then scale back up for deployment, and it should propagate the changes. It really depends. If you're injecting it in a init container, that's one way. Config maps normally the most common for an Nginx deployment that I've seen. So I'm assuming you're doing it that way. Oh, I'm sorry, Willie, you can't post links. That is the one, not Cubestone.
Waleed, send us the link over like LinkedIn or something.
Yeah. Oh, Cube STR.
Okay.
Check this out.
It's funny that ingress problem. It's so common, and particularly for Rancher users. I'm curious if this person's using Rancher, because you get the impression you can manipulate that client max body size limit, but you can't really. So you think you can change it, but you can't.
It's a storage benchmark for testing, Steve. That's actually
come
cool.
on, Waleed. I went through all this work.
Yeah. Here's the solution. It's awesome. Yeah.
All right. Fine, man.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's in terms of a pod not picking up a new file or something like that. It normally has to do with an issue with the injections, depending on what you're running. If you're in, I'm not using Rancher. Have you completely redone the deployment? Have you like scaled to 0 or done an update, or did you just like change the config map and it's not propagating? That would be my guess, but I also would need a little bit more information.
That'd be good to see. We'll debug live Kubernetes or Nginx problems.
Yeah, come with your questions. Nginx is it works. It's the base. It just works. Yeah, it comes out of the box.
Except for that.
So you deleted the pod, brought it back up. Use a config map for the conf, or did you inject it and it rebuilt itself? The only thing I can think of is if Nginx has some sort of rewrite, or if writing to the wrong config file. Did you go into the pod and see that there's a change to the config file? Like the config file is changed in the pod.
We're asking questions, right?
Yeah. Client max body size limit of 1 megabit.
If you SSH in, have you set the client max body size limit to be more?
So wait, hold on. You're updating it in the service YAML? Is that how Nginx works? I swear you have to update it in the actual controller itself. No? Maybe that's just a mistype. I tried both. It wasn't changed in the pod. Yeah, so if I was to debug this, the first thing I'd want to go do is exec into the pod and see if it's there. If it's in the comp file, and it's not changing, then that is a ping to Nginx automatically of WTF, right? Because there could actually be a bug on them, right? So it's, hey, set up my Nginx. Why am I getting throttled right now, right? If it's not showing up in the pod, then a couple questions of how are you injecting it? Config map, init container, in the pod definition itself, right? As sort of that boot sequence. Here's the one file I want to inject in. Those would be my 3 options. Config file, honestly, I like the best. I love config maps the best for stuff like this. Easiest to change and easiest to propagate and scale. So yeah, that'd be the 2 things. And then the last one would be just throw Kubernetes out. I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's kind of how I would debug. It's an annotation. Okay, so use the annotation to do it. It's annotation that gets propagated into the Nginx controller through. Interesting. And so when you use it's annotation of the service. And when you use it, you can see the configuration change in the Nginx pod.
I think he's saying he can't see it change.
Yeah.
Which could be a problem.
Yeah,
I'd be curious. I'd be curious if you just reloaded manually. Like if you could, I know you can't restart the pod, but if you went into the pod, fiddled the conf, do a reload of settings, which means you don't have to reboot the pod.
Yeah.
And see if it works, then it's like, all right, it's not a problem. It's that annotation, it's not happening.
Yeah, I always find it's a problem one layer down, right? So if Kubernetes is the abstraction, you get into annotations and service definitions. It's like, okay, well, I'm trusting Kubernetes to make up that gap, right? Instead of just injecting it into the comp file. So normally what I would do is I'd inject in the conf file, go in, make sure it's there, go into the container and change it if I have to, and then test it. And then it's, okay, is that the issue? Because if I changed it and it's still not making the change to the Nginx setup, then it's not me, right? So that way you can rule it out. And then you kind of go, okay, well, let's see, what layers of abstraction I should use. Should I use a config file? Should I use an annotation, service definition? Didn't necessarily know. I didn't know that you could do that in Nginx using an annotation. So that's actually new to me.
Yeah, I want to find out about that.
This is just one of those workflow problems in Kubernetes, because and there goes the heated camera again. It's one of those things. There's just so much going on. Finding the source of the problem can be just a big pain,
So somehow you broke your camera.
Yeah, it's just heating up. That's what happens when you just talk too much.
Well, we should sign off because it's interesting. Why don't you leave it with us? Because we could probably try it.
Yeah, ping us on. I'm in the
Twitter.
CNCF Slack, the Kubernetes Slack. You'll be able to find us, Ultimate, if you're there. Yeah, ping us. Let us know. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's probably the best thing we're all on is the CNCF Slack, I would think, right? Yeah, you can find us.
Yeah, maybe we should make a little CF channel.
Sounds good. All right.
Yeah.
I'm actioning Michael Foster.
All right. But yeah, that was a good show. A bunch of CVEs, some WTFs. Bravo. Thanks for joining. Yeah, Bravo had a good comment about the facial recognition and that earlier. So it's that one's going to be interesting. If
awesome
deep fakes for hacking like your phones and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Next one. Thanks everybody for watching. We did it. We're over an hour. It's getting longer every time.
That's great.
We'll try and rate it in maybe in the future, but maybe not.
Yeah. It's all good. Yeah. Thanks again for joining. I'm Mike Foster.
I'm Steve Jaguar.
And join us next week for another episode of